Peggy Farren, and you're watching the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. Welcome to the show. Today, we're going to be talking with Nancy Abens, who is a fine art photographer, about different finishing techniques and bookmaking a little bit. Fascinating show coming up. Be sure to check out our website at understandphotography.com, and you'll see right on the front page it says freebies. So click on that. We've got all kinds of good things you can download. It's I don't know, let me think about what's on there. Travel essentials for photographers, 30 unique gifts and practical gifts for photographers, how to get tack sharp images every time. There, what kind of camera do I buy is on there. That's something. And then there's also a plan for photography. If you feel like you have gaps in your photography education, that you just aren't sure exactly how something works or something, go through that, because it tells you basically what you need to know to really become a solid photographer. So all of that it's right on the front page. You'll see. Click here for freebies. Also on our website are the show notes to our show. So you'll see a little kind of blurbs for the last maybe 6 shows. And you just click on whichever one you're interested in. You'll see the show notes with links to the artist's websites, links to different things they talked about, and things like that. The show comes out on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. My guest today is Nancy Abens, and Nancy is a fine art photographer based in Oregon. She is really, really creative. So she's going to teach us actually some of her finishing techniques on transfers, and she's going to explain lithographs and oh gosh, she's going to go through a lot. Welcome, Nancy.
Hi, Peggy. Nice to see you.
Thanks for being on the show.
I'm looking forward to this.
So give our audience a brief bio about you.
Well, I am a working artist and a photography teacher. I teach at a high school in downtown Portland, mainly upperclassmen. I teach advanced photography there, some digital, mixed media. I do a lot of alternative process, darkroom work. I've been a working artist forever, it seems. I have a bachelor's degree in fine art photography, and I have a master's in teaching. So,
wow.
Live in Portland, Oregon. I have a wonderful husband. I have 2 2 sons, and who 30 and 26. And my mom, elderly mom, lives in our backyard in a little, what we call in Portland, an ADU, accessory dwelling unit, but I like to just call it her cottage, her little house.
I like cottage better too.
Yeah. ADU, nobody knows what it is.
All right, so let's talk about photo transferring. Can you first just kind of give us a brief overview about what do you mean by photo transferring?
So there's tons of different transfer techniques. And so using the one that I mainly am working on right now is a transfer process where I take all these photographs. I work with them in Lightroom and Photoshop. I do a lot of layering in Photoshop. And then they're printed out onto a special film that's made by this company. It's DASS, D-A-S-S, DASS Art Film. And so it's like an acetate that's coated with something to transfer the ink. So I print it on my printer on this film, and then you can transfer onto a variety of substrates. And the one I mainly use is cradled birch panels that I paint with an iridescent paint, because it gives it sort of this more sparkly kind of look. And once it's printed, you coat and the board is painted. You coat the board with a solution of what is called super sauce, which is by this company, DASS Art, that is it's like a binding agent, and then you mix that with isopropyl alcohol. And so it sort of is the consistency of syrup. And you pour this on and brush it on, wait a couple minutes, and then lay the film down on it and kind of smooth it all out, and then peel the film back, and the ink is transferred onto the board. So that's the main one that I really like using. I've done it on plaster. Plaster is pretty cool. Gel transfers. You can use Purell with this film. Purell, the hand sanitizer, coat like printmaking paper with it and transfer with that. So there's many different things you can do. So I mainly do it on the wood though, and this other stuff called stone paper, which is the paper is super heavy, and it's, I believe, made of limestone and resin. And so when you transfer the solution onto this paper, it doesn't absorb like the wood does, so it sits on top of it. And so when I put the transfer film down, I can manipulate the edges a lot. It's very liquidy. And so you get a lot of mistakes, which I kind of like, but I can also really manipulate the edges. So they're very, very reminiscent of Polaroid emulsion transfers. So those are the two main ones that I'm working with, the two main substrates. But I've done it onto, I've done it onto mat board. I've done it onto metal. So tried different things, but those are the two substrates that I really prefer.
Wow. All right. So since you gave me so much detail, I'm just going to go right into the questions.
Okay.
No, I love it. That was really good. I feel like you made it sound so easy compared to what I was thinking. Okay. So I have a couple questions. Well, I probably have more than two. Do you have to have a special kind of printer?
So you need a pigment printer. So I have an Epson SureColor P800. So with lots of inks that are, you can't just use a regular desk jet printer. That won't work. So yeah, you need a good printer. And at first I started using just the matte black, but I've started using more of the photo black. So you have to have that option to get the good transfer. And so the inks.
It's an inkjet printer though?
It's an inkjet printer. It's an Epson.
Photo quality.
Oh yeah, photo quality. So big cartridges of ink, and what is there? 10 of them, I think. Yeah.
Now, how big can you print?
So I have my printer just takes 17-inch wide. It's a wide format printer. I really want to buy the bigger one. So you can get the film in. I think it comes 24 inches wide. I think that's as large as you can go, and then as long as you want. So,
but you could do this technique on any size. So if you got one of the big printers,
well, I'd have
to still do this technique.
You could do the technique. It gets, the bigger you get, the harder it is. It's very, very difficult to get it lined up. So the biggest I tend to do is like 17 by 22. You know, that standard digital size. And I'm getting good at it with the wood. It's much, much trickier doing it on that paper. So sometimes I'll do it on large sheets of watercolor paper to get that texture, like a 300-pound paper. But it's, yeah, the larger it goes, it just gets much harder to do. The little ones are a piece of cake.
I'm visualizing like when you're trying to like even stick your cell phone screen protector on. If you don't get it perfect,
yes,
you're kind of doomed.
Yes, you're kind of doomed. When I first started, I had so many mistakes, and it's and I've been working with it on the wood especially for several years now, and so most of the time it works really well. I just got done doing a bunch of new ones, and every single one messed up. It was so, I don't know what, I'm still not, I think that the film was a little defective. So I've gotten very good at spotting. So when I did darkroom work in college, I was printing really large. I was using infrared film and printing really 20 by 24 prints and hand painting them. And I was a pretty sloppy printmaker, especially going so big. And so I would have so much dust. So I became so good at spotting. It's really funny with my students, they hate spotting, and I love it now. And so I'm finding now that I'm doing it with these transfers, I'm having to go back and do the same thing. And so I get like Copic markers and just find the color, and I'm just like spotting these areas where it lifted off.
Okay.
It didn't adhere to the wood. And for some reason, this whole last group of work that I did, I am having to repair all of them. And if it's really bad, you have to just wash everything off. Wash it all off, re-gesso the board, repaint the board, reprint the image. And so it's, the mess ups are a drag.
I was going to say it can get pretty frustrating, it sounds like.
Sometimes it can get pretty frustrating. It's just, it's one of those satisfying feelings, though, of when you peel everything back and it's like, it's all great. So, but yeah, not so good when it's messing up.
Oh, geez. So how did you find out about this, and what made you get interested in it?
So partially, I've always been into more alternative processes with photography. Always. I like that hands-on. I like the uniqueness that you can get with a more hands-on process. The more, where you're painting emulsions onto things, you're doing lumens, you're doing cyanotypes, Van Dyke prints. I like that. I'm a very process-oriented person. And so for me, just digital photographs and printed up, it just doesn't satisfy that need as an artist. And so, and especially with teaching, I'm always trying to find new techniques to show my kids, show my students that, it doesn't have to be just a digital photograph and then printed and then, put in a box somewhere or put on the screen and done. And so I was researching different transfer techniques. Doing like acrylic gel transfers and collage ideas. And I came across this book and video by a woman, Bonnie Lotka, who I believe started this DOS company. And so then I just, ordered it and started messing around with it. And it was so great. And it was also, I couldn't afford to keep framing photographs. And so I wanted to find something that I could do a finished work, but I didn't have to frame it. And so that's when I started, first using the cradled birch panels, but I was printing out photographs and then adhering them to them so I didn't have to frame anything. And then I thought, this would be great if I could transfer the image right onto the board. So it became, an object. It became more sculptural, a little bit more dimensional. And that's when I came across this, and I just started playing with it and practicing it and, finding different things to print on. So that's kind of how it came about with that.
That is so cool. So it sounds to me like you never get bored with photography. You keep coming up with new cool things.
No, I never get bored with anything. I'm always busy.
I tell you, I want to take one of your classes. It sounds like you probably get a lot of, all your creative ideas have got to be great for your students.
It's wonderful. We do a lot of books, a lot of bookmaking, hand-bound books, and the transfer techniques are great for that because we can print out just small images and use Purell right on the paper, make accordion books and transfer the images so they're, right on this beautiful paper. So it's just, I love transfers. They're awesome.
So do you buy something that's pre-folded for the accordion book? How do you do that?
Everything's hand done.
How do you do that?
So I usually will get like a Reeves BFK, a nice printmaking paper, Stonehenge, something that's sometimes watercolor paper, especially if we're doing like cyanotypes, I'll do watercolor paper and just kind of measure what your image size is going to be, decide how you want your book, and then just fold it, kind of, like an old Jacob's ladder, how they fold and open up. And so fold it. We do beautiful hand-bound or handmade papers and make covers and backs and tie them, and then they open up and then transfer their images onto them. Or sometimes, kids will just want to do, or myself too, just print small digital prints or phone prints and then attach them. So put the actual prints in the books too. Do a lot of books.
Okay, I know this isn't supposed to be our topic, but I want to keep talking about books because you got me so interested.
Yeah, the books are great.
I love books. You know why? I have every inch of my wall space is taken up with photographs or something. And every time I get a new picture that I want to hang, I have to put something else down that I'm not ready to let go of. Yeah. So I like books because I'll still look at them. And in this world of digital, things are just going by the wayside. I mean, we're going to lose our pictures. We all are. They're just going to go flip. They're gone. Yeah. So I try to back them up. On my customers' pictures, I'm really good about backing up. My own, I'm not as good. But so the books appeal to me a lot. I'm always telling people, get your stuff in books. Okay, so where do you get this type of paper, like all this fancy paper you're talking about?
Well, that's not fancy paper. That's just an art store. It's just printmaking paper or watercolor paper. Any art store carries, any good art store carries that, like Blick's.
Like Dick Blick, is that what you're talking about?
Oh yeah, okay. Blick has all that paper. The film, the transfer film, you have to order from DOS. So they have, and they have a bunch of different substrates, and I mean, there's a ton of different things on that website to order. I just find that I now, the classic or the premium film and the super sauce is all I usually order from them.
Okay, I'm going back to this accordion book though, because I really like the idea of doing that with the transfer. So
yeah.
What size paper and how do you cut it so that it's straight? Because they don't sell skinny long paper, do they?
Okay. No, you have to. So most printmaking paper or watercolor paper comes with what's called a deckled edge, right? It's sort of a raw edge. So and it comes in, 32 by 40 inch sheets. That's usually how big they are, 22 by 30. So the first thing you do, decide how big do you want your images to be. And so for me, I really like, depending on the type of imagery, I guess, I like small books. I like that intimacy of that you're holding something that's precious. And so if I'm doing, like I'm working on books about my mom and about aging and memory loss, and they're very personal and they're very intimate images. And I am going to do a book with those. And so those are going to be small, like 5 by 5 is probably the largest. So 5 by 7 would be okay. But I think once you get a lot bigger than that, it's going to get bulky. So you figure out what size you want your image. How much border do you want around your images? Generally 1/2 an inch, 3/4 of an inch. And so then you measure and figure, okay, for one page, like a 5 by 5 image, if I'm doing all squares, the book would probably be 6 by 6.
Okay.
So you take your paper, they come in like the 40-inch sheets, and a ruler and tear at 6 inches. So it would be 6 inches by whatever the length is of that sheet of paper. But then many times you have to attach another one. So depending on how long you want that book to be, and do you want to be on both sides, front and back, or do you only want to view it from the front? Are you going to add text? You kind of figure out how many pages you want. And then you may have to tear off another section of 6 by 6 by 40 or 30 or whatever, and then you attach that onto it. And then you just start folding. And I use a bone folder for nice creases and just back and forth at every 6 inches.
And you
So
said a Boeing folder? What is that?
bone folder. It's a
Bone.
bookmaking tool. It's just like a giant emery board, but not an emery. It's very smooth, so you can get really nice, crisp creases. And then once that's all done, transfer your images or tape your images in, double-sided tape images in. You could do, printmaking over it. So however you're going to put your images in there, you get all that. And then the final one is taking map board and some beautiful handmade paper and covering your board and then attaching it to the book. So
Wow, that
but there's
sounds
also
fabulous.
lots of different pamphlet stitching books that this year a ton of my students did that. And then I've done blurb books too, the self-published books. I love
I know
books.
I can do those.
Oh, those are great, the blurb books. Yeah, I like those are great.
Yeah, I do too. And at first I resisted when Lightroom, I
Right.
didn't like doing my book in Lightroom, but after I got the hang of it, because does Blurb still only do it through Lightroom?
No, I don't. I think you can do. They have that was Book Smart. I think is their download app that you can do on your computer.
Oh, okay.
It's
It's been a
nice.
long time.
Yeah, and
I was
I like the control so, of arranging each of my pages. So I tend to do it in Book Smart. I put all my images in Lightroom and get them all in there. But then, yeah, I tend to lay out everything. So it takes me like a year, to put together a book. It's a little
Hey.
too long, but
faster than most of us. Most of us never do it.
true.
I do it for other people, like my son's first anniversary, his wedding photographer, I don't even think the guy offered albums. I don't know. But so I did, I was motivated to get that done for his first anniversary. But,
Yeah.
it's hard to get a book done.
Yes, it
It's a
is.
lot of work, but it's so worth it. I'll tell you. I look through my photo books. I hardly ever thumb through old pictures, and I definitely don't thumb through digital stuff, hardly at
Right.
all. In fact, I just got a new phone, and it was taking forever to transfer. And I said, you know what? I just have too many pictures on there, and I've got this little gadget called a Transcend Jet drive, I think. And you plug it into your phone, and it takes all the pictures off, and then you plug it into your computer to back it up, so you don't have to wait for the iCloud or whatever. But you can see them as they're going through, and I was like, oh, it's fun to look at all your old pictures. But since I put them on the computer to back them up, I didn't look at them,
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's a constant kind of housekeeping, I feel like, with digital photos. Going back, it's like, okay, I need more space, or I need to, yeah.
Now,
Irritating.
Heather did a lot of research, not a lot, but she researched you a little bit in some of the different transfer techniques, and she has a question in here. What is a cyanotype?
Oh, okay, so it's a cyanotype.
See, I don't even know how to say it.
Right, so cyan, the color. And it is not a transfer technique. It is one of the very first processes of photography. And it happens to be that Anna Atkins was a botanist in the 1840s, and she's probably the first female photographer. She published a book of British algae with this cyanotype process. So it is one of the earliest photographic processes, and it's wonderful. It's you take potassium ferrocyanide and ferric ammonium citrate are the two chemicals, and when they are put in equal parts together, mixed together, they become light sensitive to UV light, sunlight. And so you take the chemicals, they need to be mixed separately first. And as soon as you mix them together, it then is light sensitive. And paint that emulsion onto watercolor paper is what I generally do it onto. So it has to be some sort of paper that can be soaked and get wet. And then your image is printed onto Pictorico or a transparency, like an overhead transparency kind of film, but Pictorico is the photographic standard for that. So, and you make a negative. So in film photography, it would be analog, probably scanning in your negative, and then make a digital file, turn it into a negative, their image, black and white negative, lay that on top of the dried coated paper, and then put a piece of glass over it and go sit in the sun for anywhere from 1 to 20 minutes. We found different things. You can put it on fabric, and then all you do is rinse it with water. That's your developer water, and you get a blue and white image.
Oh.
So it is probably, one of the earliest photographic processes. And I love it because, photography, especially the history of photography, it is so male dominated, the early. And so when you find out, like, Julia Margaret Cameron and Anna Atkins, that there were these women doing really spectacular things, I really make sure my students know that. So, because it's really like, you're talking about, William Henry Jackson and Talbot and, who's Timothy O'Sullivan. It's all these men. And it's really nice when you find out that, Anna Atkins published the first book of cyanotypes in 1853, I think it was. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Good for her, because I bet it wasn't easy for her to do that at the time.
And she was a botanist, so it was like collecting specimens. So a lot of people do, you know what a photogram is?
Tell me more.
Okay, so photogram is it's cameraless photography. So you're using objects instead of negatives, film, and you lay it onto photo paper or photosensitized paper, and you get what's called a photogram. And the first ones of those were made, the most famous was Man Ray, the artist Man Ray and Laszlo Moholy-Nagy. They would lay objects onto photographic paper and then in the darkroom develop them, and they're just wonderful imagery. But you can lay any kind of object, and so a lot of times, like those first cyanotypes are actually they're photograms in that they're objects. There's no film involved. It's like an object, in her case, plants. And a lot of cyanotypes, people use plants and flatten them and lay them directly on the paper and put a sheet of glass over it. It's wonderful.
How cool.
Yeah, really. Photograms are great. So you can use anything. And there are contemporary photographers who, that's all they do. It's cameraless photography. And it's so much fun. It's just awesome. And the cyanotypes, you can do it with like fabric and lay on it. And so your body becomes it. There's a contemporary photographer, Adam Fuss, who does beautifully, really, really wonderful photograms on color photo paper. And Martha, oh my God, why am I blanking her name? Shoot, that's terrible. But there's wonderful, wonderful artists doing cameraless photography.
I had a woman on the show named Susan Francis, who's a friend of mine. Mm-hmm. She lives in Orlando, and she does something, she calls it, what does she call it? I want to say scanography, because she scans things in, but she doesn't just scan them. So I don't think that's what she calls it, but she makes is it called a mandala?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
A scandella. That's what she calls it, a scandella.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's so cool. And
yeah, scanograms is sometimes what we call them. So you're laying objects on the scanner and then working with them.
Yeah,
so, cameraless photography.
That is so cool. What else you got? You're so full of cool stuff. What else do you got?
Well,
I just wanted you to just remember that most people have never taken. If they have taken a picture with film, it was 110 film that you took to the, somewhere to get processed. You didn't know, most of us don't know that much about the whole
The
process.
film photography, right? And I forget that because that was my background. Was all just working in the darkroom, and it's really, for me and for my students. I mean, it's really special that we have a darkroom. We have 14 enlargers, and the kids. I think we're so inundated with imagery and so inundated with digital that to have, I mean, the darkroom is so romantic and mysterious. And, you go into this, and then in high school, they're like, what is this place? You go in and there's red lights because of safe lights. And there's water running, and it's like, it's just so different. And you have to be so much slower and more thoughtful about what you're taking, because your film, you can't see what you're getting at all, and then we develop the film, and that's all like magic. And then that first print that they make, I mean, it is magic to watch this image appear out of these chemicals in this weird room that you're in, and they love it. It's so different. And so I feel so privileged to be able to teach these kids today about this. And many of my students go on to being artists and being photographers. They're in New York, and they love the film. A lot of kids will go shoot film always, no digital, and scan them in and then work with them, print them out digitally. But it's really exciting, and you can do so many wonderful processes. And I teach from a fine art perspective. I don't teach from a photojournalistic. It's much more fine art, and so many of my students will go on to art schools, and most art schools, they do have dark rooms, and they're working with a lot of those older processes. But it's so cool because you can take I love that mix of new and old. Like, take photos on your phone, but then turn them into digital negatives and then work with them with these early photographic processes. It's just so exciting, what you can do. The possibilities are endless. So that's really just really great.
So tell us more. So let me see what else Heather's got written down here. So here's a question. What is the difference in the look achieved by a photo intaglio?
Intaglio. Photo intaglio and photolithography. Yeah. So those are new techniques that I've been working with. And so the photo intaglio is really, I guess the more proper term is polymer photogravure. So they're a print, and so you need a printing press for that, and they're so wonderful. So you get a plate, and I use what are called solar plates, and they're like a tin, and then covered with a light sensitive emulsion, but also sort of I don't even know how to describe it. But there's like an emulsion on it. And you make that is going to become an etching plate. So these photo intaglios are like etchings of your photographs. Oh. But, real etchings and real photo intaglio would be used with acid. So the solar plates are great because you don't need to use acid. So what you do with those is, and I teach this one too. For me personally, I take a lot of photographs of the forest. The forests I live in Oregon, are unbelievably beautiful. They're profound. They're so old, and I just find them so powerful to be in the forests here. The light, everything about it. So most of my photo intaglios have been of landscapes that I've taken, and pretty much in forest. It's so lush. There's ferns everywhere. It's very primeval. It's like, in Florida, the tropics, it's kind of like that here, but with, these gigantic cedars and all these gigantic, it's just wonderful. But so the images are printed onto that Pictorico, again, that same sort of transparency film, as a positive. So a black and white positive. And there's some, curves in Photoshop and some ways in Lightroom to get the right contrast. And so you want to print them the size of your plate. So most of the ones that I have done are, and that I have my students do, are like 4x5.
Okay.
And so these plates, so you get your image, you put it on the image on the plate, and then you need to expose it to a UV light source. So I have a couple different light boxes, and it's the first thing. I should back up a little bit. So you want a halftone screen. So I have little halftone screens, which gives a dot pattern, and so you lay that onto the polymer plate first, and we've discovered that the best exposure is like 45 seconds. So 45 seconds with this screen, take it out of the light box, take off the screen, put your image, your positive image onto it, and expose for another 45 seconds. And then when that's done, you just take running water and a brush, and you brush this plate for about a minute and a half.
Okay.
The plate becomes an etching. It etches out. What's washed away is printmaking is always backwards. I think is the unexposed areas, and then the exposed areas are literally etched into the plate. So you get this, and it turns out gold, and you can feel it. It's got a texture, and you see your image on there. And then you get ink. I use a Akua ink, which is like an oil-based ink, printing ink, but it cleans up with water. It's awesome. And you brush it onto your plate, wipe your plate off, just like this is what you do when you're making a etching. And then the Reeves BFK or Stonehenge, a really wonderful printmaking paper, is soaked in water, so it's damp. And then you lay that on your plate and run it through a printing press. So you get what looks like, when you look at it, it's like you see sort of the photographic image, but it's an etching. They're exquisite, and they're incredibly detailed and just beautiful. So that's the photo intaglios. They're my new thing. I bought myself a printing press so I can do this at home all summer and then at school I have a large printing press to work with. And then the photo lithography. Actually, I went to the National Art Educators Conference in New York City a couple years ago, and I took a workshop in this. And it is really cool. You use this stuff called Pronto plate, and printers, and they'll have those at like places where they're running like printing presses, and it's a place or a kind of surface that printers can get proofs of their prints. So it's this weird plastic sheet, and it's got billions of tiny holes in it. And so what we use that for is print. You get your image, black and white, positive, print it out onto this Pronto plate sheet through a laser printer. So you need a laser printer that's got toner cartridges in it, where it sort of gets that heat. And then, this is a very laborious process, the photo liths. But you take then a solution of gum arabic and water, and you dip a sponge in that and rub it all over the plate. And then you take a brayer full of, it has to be oil-based ink, and you cover your plate with the ink, and then you do that, you rub it off again with the gum arabic and water, cover the plate again, and you do that about 4 to 6 times. And the toner in the print the ink adheres to the toner. So this Pronto plate becomes your printing plate. And so then you get all this ink on it, and then you do the same thing. The damp print baking paper on it, run it through the press. And the difference between the photo intaglios and the photo lift, the photo intaglio is highly detailed, like every detail comes in there. And the photo lift is much more contrasty, much more graphic in its appearance, and very, very richly toned. And I'm still, for teaching it, it's so laborious, rubbing that, and then you're using oil-based ink, and so it's such a drag cleaning it up. But I'm not quite sure it's worth the effort. I love the photo intaglio more, but I do love the look of the photo lift. When you get a good one, they're pretty awesome. So, but they're much more bold. They don't keep the detail. Like a lot of times you lose any detail that's in your shadows on those. But if you like really detailed, the photo intaglios are just beautiful. And there's ways to use colored inks, and you could register them and then get 3 color prints, but I like just the black and white.
Wow.
I know there's so much detail in all of this, but they're so cool. They're just so much fun to do. So.
I just want to make sure the audience knows that we are going to share some of your work on our page, of course, in the show notes on understandphotography.com. But you also have a website that Nancy.
Do. Yeah. Well, it's Nancy Abens Artworks, and it's just nancyabens.com. And then I have an Instagram page also, and I post a lot of these things on Instagram. And that's just Nancy Abens. I don't do any fancy usernames, so.
Okay, we'll post all that, all your links and everything like that. Okay, so now you as a fine artist,
mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite, or do you dabble in all this different type of stuff, or what are you selling?
Well, right now I'm in several different shows that are around the birds that I photograph. I am a very avid birder. I love it. And I keep my life list. And so most of like on the transfers, the wood transfers and the stone paper, I have a huge series of birds that I work with, and I take all the photographs, and then in Lightroom and Photoshop, I layer the image with different textures. So they're very painterly. And the photographs themselves, I have some really good just straight ahead bird photographs, but it just doesn't excite me to just take them. I need to do more. So that's what I've been selling quite a bit. And I just was in a big show at the coast here, the bird show, and I'm in one for the Wetlands Conservancy. So it's a kind of a fundraiser right now that's traveling all over Oregon. But it's mainly the birds for that one. And I had a solo show last year. I have a gallery here in Portland, Guardino Gallery. And I have a huge garden. In fact, right now it is unbelievably beautiful. It is just so beautiful. So I was a florist for 12 years also. And so I started last year. I wanted to chronicle the garden, and so I started doing it through flower arrangements. And I would cut all these different flowers in my garden and then photograph them, and then work in the same way that I work with the birds, and sort of layer them with textures and work with the colors and then transfer them. And so I had a solo show last year that chronicled my garden of all these bouquets and arrangements. So those are kind of what I'm working on, but right now I'm going more towards the photo intaglios, and I really want to work on some work about my mom, more serious work, and grief, and my dad dying. And I've been working on throughout these years different images about that, and just thinking of it more in terms of I definitely want to do a series of books. I had one of the pieces that I did about my mom in a show that the photographer Robert Adams was the curator. So I was really honored to be in that show. The show was called The Sacred, and it was a work about my mom. I called it The Diminishing, and of just her. It was with textures and kind of a manipulated series of photographs. So kind of working on a lot of that. And it goes back to one of, I'm a huge Radiohead fan, the band Radiohead. Like, I'm kind of obsessed with Radiohead. Probably old enough to be their mother, but I love this band. And many years ago, it was like, my walks, it's all I would listen to. And I just would see so many images. And so I ended up doing a blurb book about glimpses and memories, and it all kind of tied in with their music. And I look at those now, and they really are images I'm starting to go back to and work with in this grouping about my mom and about grief and memories, and that what we see in the peripheral vision. It's, these like moments that we don't pay attention to, but that are happening all the time. And that's kind of where I'm going with my more straight photography. But so they're very blurred. I use a lot of motion. And then I think I'm going to start printing on vellum, because I like that idea of that transparency. And I've been building little boxes that these vellum pieces will be in, that will show kind of the light through them. So that's sort of, I'm kind of, I want to put the birds and the flowers are very, I love doing them. I love finding the birds and trying to get photographs of them and work with them. And they're highly decorative. And so I want to kind of put that aside for a while and really concentrate on these more poetic images about what's happening more personally. And so with mom and, just those, we're all getting older, and what does that mean? And what does it look like? And, what's important, and kind of wrestling with these really big questions in a very poetic way is what I'm working on now.
I think what you're doing is really meaningful work, especially to us as baby boomers, there are a whole bunch of us, because our parents are aging.
Right. And I really feel like that right now, that's where I want to concentrate all my work. That I do think the most meaningful work that people do is when it's affecting them so personally, whether it's joyful or painful or both. And, finding that poetry in those kind of poetic, intimate images, I think are so important. And, it's both, it's a way to understand, what's happening around death, around grief, around these things that are happening, watching my mom lose her capabilities to do anything, and understanding that, this could happen to us, and so it's just, I want to honor that. I want to record it so I can remember it. I may, who knows if I will ever show it. I do think that at some point I will, because I think it's important. I think that it is, I think many, many people can relate to this. And, I do think that's the power of art, is to help us understand these really big things that are happening, and to, help people see them through different eyes, and see some of this stuff that is very painful, see it more with, I don't know. It's just very humbling, the whole thing. And it is really, it's what I really want to, I want to kind of put aside the things that are fun for me to do and concentrate on this more meaningful work. And, I am very much drawn to that idea of poetry. I love reading poetry. I love, and thinking about that in terms of image. And it's what I try to teach my students. It's like those intimate images, those images that, you look at them and you feel something in your heart. One of my students, we're at the end of school, and I have them do what's called photo essays. So, we learn all the technical stuff in first semester, and then second semester, they choose their own subjects. They just have to try different techniques, different formats. So some do books, their installations or whatever. But one girl did, and I don't want to make you cry, but she did this beautiful photo essay on her grandmother. And she presented it yesterday. We showed portfolios. And it was just a series of probably 10 images from, to some of her grandma. She talked to her grandma about, her wedding, had her grandma bring out objects. She photographed these objects. It was so beautiful. And it was those types of poetic images. The other students in the class, everybody, they could relate to it because they have, it's their grandparents who are going through what our parents are going through. Right. And they all could relate to that. And they were all like, this is so beautiful. And just, a photograph of her hands, a photograph of the top of her head. And this young woman who took the photograph said that, it was really, her grandma didn't want to be photographed and was very self-conscious. And so at first, and I asked her, I said, well, have you showed these to your grandma yet? And she said, no, but I talked to her husband and I've shown them to the other family members and who all, it's so wonderful. And I said, you need to show these to her because they are just so intimate and so beautiful. So it was just really great. That's a little side note, but it was really wonderful to see these yesterday, to see this high school student have so much thought and care, and just beautiful images. So
yeah. Well, you know what? I'm going to bring this back to a business aspect of selling your photography, because what you have taught us in this show, I think, are things that we teach on a regular basis, but you really kind of made it more personal right now because, first we talked about doing these creative techniques that, you have this basic photography, but you put this cool spin on it with your finishing techniques. But you're also talking about doing projects instead of just, here's a picture of a bird, here's a picture of a tree, here's a landscape, here's my macro work. You think in terms of projects, and that's what we try to teach people when they say, hey, I want to sell my work. You need to think in terms of projects. So this is so helpful. And I think we've actually, God, that went fast, man. It went so fast, but so interesting. Thank you so much for helping us with all this stuff, because you really kind of opened up my mind to a lot of things that I didn't know about. And
possibilities. The one thing, though, I never want people to stop looking at the images and see the technique instead. And, that's why I think the bird images are so beautiful. But it is one of the things, it's like, what are these? Are they paintings? Are they photographs? Are they? And they're to me, they're more like prints, because I'll only do a couple of them. And I don't sell that much work, like anything about my mom, I would never even put that for sale. Some of these personal projects, I do sell the bird ones because they have that more decorative aspect to them. I think it's really hard to sell photography. I think it's very, very difficult. And, especially with phones and so I'm happy to be selling some of these, but I do want to just keep them in editions. I don't want to, because they are unique. Really, each one is unique. And, but I'm thinking of going down to, like, when I make one, I'm only going to use that bird image maybe 3 times. And then, yeah.
But so, that's good, though. You think like an artist, and that's actually, if for selling the work, the hard part is for that artist to think like a business person and push that together. That's what we are always trying to do, and it's difficult.
It's so hard. It's all right, so now tell us. I want to make the work. So I have massive amounts of work that, I don't know what else. Maybe when I'm dead, somebody will find all my studio of work and my children will make some money off of it.
All right. So give us your website again.
So It's Nancy Abens Artworks, and it's nancyabens.com. I think that's all you have to put in for the link.
And it's
www.
Nancy, Nancy,
Nancy as in boy, ENS. Nancy Abens. So I think if you just Google that, I think the website comes up right away too. And yeah, I have to update that a little bit because I've got all this new work I haven't put in, but I have the photo intaglios in there, and I don't know if I have photo lists, but yeah. So that's all there. And then the Instagram is just Nancy Abens, and it's public, and that is the extent of my social media.
Yeah.
And I haven't figured out all the hashtag stuff, and it's like, it's too much work.
You know what? If I wasn't in business, I wouldn't bother with all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe I would put my morning walk up on Facebook and that's about it. Or maybe share a joke, but
yeah,
I wouldn't do everything I do if I didn't do it for business. So thank you for being on the Understand Photography show.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Me too. Me too. And I will see you.
Yes.
I will see you face to face in 2020 for our South Africa trip. Pardon me?
Maybe sooner than that. I may have to take a trip down there. So
yes. Nancy's sister lives here in Naples, Florida, so that's our connection.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you, Nancy. Wow, I got a lot out of that show. And I did have to pause for a minute. That's when she said, I hope I don't make you cry again. I did kind of lose it a little bit because my dad is really sick right now. Hopefully by the time this airs, he'll be all better. I'm Peggy Farren. Thank you so much for watching the Understand Photography show or listening. If you would do us a huge favor and leave us a review on iTunes, that is the most helpful thing you could do for us right now. Heather has been putting a link right in the show notes directly to the iTunes reviews to make it easier for you. So thank you so much, and we will see you next Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time for the next episode of the Understand Photography show.
Get up!